Let's welcome in now Janatan Sayeh. He's a research analyst at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and Rebecca Heinrich, foreign policy expert, both joining us now. Janatan, first to you. I heard people describe this last night as perhaps a Berlin Wall falling type of moment. Give us your assessment, what you know about the situation, and how far or how close maybe the regime is to actually collapsing.
Last night, protests really demonstrated how they have the potential to pose an existential threat to the regime. And as you pointed out, this might be even have more potential than the fall of the Berlin Wall. It would be more transformative, without a doubt. And given that it's the only anti-Islamist civic movement in the Middle East, it is in Washington's favor to support these protesters. But going beyond the region, the Islamic Republic has operated as a node for China and Russia. For Beijing, they have provided them with cheap smuggled oil, and for Russia, they of course rely on the Islamic Republic for their drones. So really, we're talking about a transformation that would go beyond the region, and the opportunity that is facing Washington is really unprecedented.
Rebecca, give us your thoughts, because we've heard President Trump threaten the Iranian regime. If they do crack down on these protesters in a certain way, there would be, quote, hell to pay. How close do you think we are to some sort of U.S. intervention in Iran?
Well, it's hard to know, but it's critically important that President Trump has thrown his support with the Iranian people. It's very important that we have this clear in our own mind. These protests are owned by the Iranian people. They are the ones driving this. They're tired not just of economic malpractice on the part of the regime, but the repression, and they want to claim their identity back as Iranians, and they want to take it back from the Islamists that are ruling in the regime. So for President Trump to support the protesters at this point, we need to know to the extent that the Iran regime is cracking down on the protesters violently like they have in the past. We can't know that fully because of the lack of insight that we have, which is why it's so critically important that the United States can provide practical support to the Iranian people in the form of internet access. This can come from private companies like Starlink. There's some early reporting that there has been Starlink sort of smuggled into the country. But if we could have full free Starlink provided over Iran for a sustainable period of time, that's going to be the lifeblood for these protesters to continue to communicate with one another and provide insight for the rest of the world to see what's going on with their movement.
Let's talk a little bit more about the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. This is what he said, pointing the finger directly at President Trump for these protests.
Last night in Tehran and a few other places, people came and did damage to their own buildings, ruining their own streets in order to make the president of another country happy. Because he said that he would come to their aid, he should pay attention to the state of his own country instead.
So we already know the U.S. can strike Iran. We saw that previously with those B-2 bomber attacks, Janatan. If there is U.S. involvement here, if President Trump does act on his threat to fight back against the regime, what do you think that looks like?
Well, it is, first of all, very important for us to keep in mind that the key takeaway for U.S. policymakers with recent developments is that Washington's Iran's policy has not alienated the Iranian public. We have not seen any anti-U.S. chants. There has not been any mention of U.S. sanctions during the protests. So you're talking about a civic movement that holds the regime accountable, but more importantly, there's no effect of rally around the flag, unlike what we heard during the 12-day war that may have been the case, which ended up not being true, of course. So Washington and Jerusalem should really keep in mind here that in any dynamic they had with the Islamic Republic, one, it has not escalated into a full-scale war between Iran and America, but more importantly, there is an opportunity here to support these protesters, whether we're talking about cyber attacks, but ultimately, I think everyone is aligned that when we talk about confronting the Islamic Republic, it is not about boots on the ground. It's about supporting protesters that are, of course, inherently secular, nationalistic, and really abide by Western values. And that would really give us another ally in a very turbulent region.
Yeah, we saw the video of the man posting the President Trump Avenue street sign over the street that was named after the Ayatollah. That obviously had to sting for the supreme leader. I want to expand the conversation out and talk about a few other national security issues. Rebecca, this is for you. The ambassadors from both Denmark and Greenland were on Capitol Hill yesterday trying to elicit support that would prevent President Trump from pursuing the acquisition of Greenland. At this point, there are 9 Republican senators against it, but the president still seems determined. Here he is.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you. You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added 1 more dog sled.
We don't know if that was a joke. Maybe it was. But Vice President Vance also talked about Greenland yesterday in the press briefing.
My advice to European leaders and anybody else would be to take the President of the United States seriously. Greenland is really important, not just to America's missile defense, but to the world's missile defense. Number 2, we know that there are hostile adversaries that have shown a lot of interest in that particular territory, that particular slice of the world. So what we're asking our European friends to do is to take the security of that landmass more seriously.
Rebecca, as you know, the U.S. interest in Greenland goes back to before we were involved in World War II. President Trump seems very serious about this, perhaps purchasing Greenland. Give us your thoughts on what you see playing out.
Well, so first, I think it's counterproductive to even imply that there's going to be a forced takeover of our ally, Greenland, which, of course, is territory controlled by Denmark, a great NATO ally and cooperative with the United States. But I agree that the United States does have a strategic interest in the Arctic and specifically what happens in Greenland. This is all about sea lanes and the melting ice and what that's going to do for access in those critical choke points, and then also connecting the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans, and so close to our homeland. And so I could go on about the strategic importance for the United States. What I would just encourage the administration to do is to work with this diplomatically with Denmark and the rest of the alliance. There's diplomatic channels. We already have treaty with Denmark that permits the United States to increase our military presence. I think it's counterproductive for the threats to continue because President Trump has so wisely and effectively gotten NATO allies to commit more to defense. And so I think it undermines a lot of the good work he's done on getting NATO into a better place to handle the multiple threats that we have that face all of us in the West.
Yeah, we often see the stick come before the carrot with President Trump, and that might be what's playing out right now. Another question for you about Venezuela. The opposition leader, Maria Machado, will be meeting with President Trump next week. For years, she and the United States have been demanding the release of Venezuela's political prisoners, and now that is finally happening as families wait outside the prison there for their loved ones to be reunited with them. I think, Rebecca, this is a very tangible signal that the United States is able to kind of enforce their will and do what should be done in Venezuela as we go through this transition period.
Well, that's right. So I think that it's important that the administration give support rhetorically, at least, to these pro-democracy people and these movements that have existed for a long time in Venezuela. At the same time, it's critical that the United States not allow Venezuela to fall into chaos and civil war. So you have to have some kind of stable government in place, even if it's not one that we prefer. So it's both. You want to support the democracy movement, and then you want to get them in power as soon as possible so that the United States is not engaged in a long-term occupation. You want to turn it back, that country back over to the sovereign will of the Venezuelan people.
And, of course, one of the key mistakes, of course, hindsight is 2020. After the fall of Iraq, a lot of the Baathists and Iraqi government officials were just sent home, and that's how we wound up with al-Qaeda and other terror groups. And, Janatan, last to you on this one. Venezuela has also been a crucial hub for Middle Eastern terror organizations, including Hezbollah. Give us your thoughts real quickly on what you think the fall of Venezuela means, or the fall of Nicolas Maduro, I should say, means for that nexus.
If you are a regime official sitting in Tehran, what you're witnessing in your perspective is a domino effect. First, we saw the collapse of the Assad regime. Then came the leaders of Hezbollah. and now Venezuela. And the Islamic Republic officials are now worried they're going to be next. Long they have viewed Venezuela as a safe haven in case they want to escape to. Now, of course, they're exploring options like Moscow, similar like Assad did. But ultimately, it doesn't only limit their influence in the globe. It really threatens their stability internally and might actually lead to defections within the Islamic Republic, because the average regime supporter or official no longer sees this as a viable option, and they know they don't have a place to escape to.
Yeah, domino effect is something we keep hearing over and over again. Hopefully we'll see that and more freedom spreading across the world. Janatan Sayeh from FDD and Rebecca Heinrich, great to have you both here with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.